Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, 138 MMA proudly brings to you the hottest picks in the world!
Heard it right. 138 MMA is back to break down Bellator 286. Now, before we get crazy and go into this card, there are some really good fights on this, and that is awesome, but there are a couple of fights that I'm not going to break down in full, and let me tell you why. There are 3 fights in particular. I'm going to point them out. Lance Gibson Jr., Sumiko Inaba, Weber Almeida. All 3 of them are supposed to win their fights. Bellator likes them. They are marketable people. Their opponents are being brought in to lose. And I don't mean to say that in a way that Bellator is padding records and whatever. They're trying to build stars similar to like they did with AJ McKee. They had really good success with that. AJ McKee became a huge star in Bellator, exclusively in Bellator. Lance Gibson Jr. is supposed to be the next AJ McKee. His opponent is being brought in to lose. I'm not going to break down a fight that obviously is going to be very one-sided. I don't want to do that. That's not good for anybody. It's wasting all of our time. So, Sumiko Inaba, same deal. Very marketable person. There's a reason she's fighting someone who is 2-5 when she is, in fact, 4-0. That is how that works. At the Bellator level, they could have found her someone else to fight. They did not want to. The reason why is because they want her to get wins, because she's a marketable person. They're building her up. Similar to an Anastasia Yankova that used to be a Bellator mainstay. I don't know that she's still there. I haven't seen her in a long time. But Weber Almeida, it's a little bit different. He did have an opponent drop out, so they threw someone in there for him that is going to most likely be a loss on their record and a win for Almeida. Now, upsets do happen. This is mixed martial arts, so any of these folks could lose. I just think that Bellator is putting the opponents on the other side of the cage from these folks in order to build their resume, and that's why we're not going to go over the full detail for them. It'd be very one-sided. These 3 are supposed to win. They will probably win. But we do have some exciting fights on the card. We have one other one that's also not super exciting, but I'm going to break that down because there's something I wanted to point out in that, and you'll probably see that one next on my notes. It is next. So you'll see that one next. So let's go ahead and get into that one. Don't worry about this. These 3, I guess you can probably say they're locks. If you parlay them together, you still get, what, like minus 400? I don't know. No, that's not true. It's probably better than that. But either way, there are some good fights on this card, some that I'm really looking forward to. So let's go ahead and talk about those and not waste any more time with this. Okay, so here we have Bobby Seronio III taking on Miguel Peimbert. This is an interesting one, and not because I think this fight is going to be good. I think it's going to be very one-sided. Bobby's going to get the win here, more likely than not. But I wanted to explicitly break down this fight, even though it could be lumped in with my squash matches that I had at the beginning. But there's something interesting about this one that I wanted to point out. But first, we're going to point out the positives of Bobby because there are some there. He's very high-paced, fast starter. It's a really good thing for him because he comes out with a big head of steam, puts a pace on his opponents, and he can keep it for, well, as far into the fights as I've seen, which he's only in 2 fights. So you don't have a lot to go off of, but he's able to hold that pace, so that's good. He does like to slam his opponents a lot, these really big slams, multiple times in the same fight. Cool, gets a big reaction. A lot of times it doesn't deal a ton of damage. Sometimes it does, a lot of times it doesn't. But it does use a lot of energy, so I gave that the plus and the minus. However, his combined opponent record is 1-4. Now, that leads me to the next one. Peimbert here. I'm sure it's to no fault of his. Maybe it is, but I don't think so. But he comes from a promotion that is known for padding records. I don't remember the Gladiator something or another. I don't remember the name of it. But if you look up his record on Tapology, or even Sherdog, I think, it shows right there, there's a disclaimer about coming from his fights being from a promotion that is known for padding records. He's 1-1. His one win is over a guy that I'm pretty sure never fought again. So there's that. His loss was another pretty low-level guy. That's not the issue. The issue is if there's guys coming from that place, that promotion, to Bellator, you got to assume it's a squash match. Now, I'm not trying to say Bellator's setting these fights up. But I'm not trying to say that they're not either. There's a couple of these that look really rough. So, for that, I don't think that he's going to win. I don't think Peimbert has a chance to win this. I do think Bobby has some pretty good skills for being as green as he is, but at the same time, that's just not something that you would like to see when you look up a guy's record, is that they're coming from a place where records are being padded. So that's what I wanted to point out, is the record padding. That's why I didn't include this one in the squash match. Yeah, Bobby's probably going to win. I'm not going to bet on it. The guy's 2-0 against 1-4 competition. Upsets can happen, and here could be a really likely one. Who knows? But I'm not going to bet on that either, because I do think that Bobby probably wins this fight, and there's a reason for that. So, but anyway, that's the pick there. I'm going to move into some of the more entertaining fights on this card right after this one, so don't worry, we have more to come and much better fights. In our next matchup, we have a match that originally I thought was going to be a razor-thin line between who I thought was going to win. However, after doing more research on this, I actually have one side that I'm leaning to a little bit more than I originally thought. So in this matchup, we have J.J. Wilson taking on Vladimir Tokov. Now, both guys 4-1 in their last 5 fights. I'm going to start off on the Tokov side, breaking down his pros and cons, and then we'll jump over to Wilson here. So for Tokov, he does have that strong wrestling. We've seen it in almost all of his fights. He uses that well. It's his best asset. So yeah, there's that. And something that is less obvious is he's able to adjust his game plan mid-fight. And I've seen this in a few of his fights, but when his wrestling isn't working the way he wants it to, he can adjust that. In fact, he doesn't have, I'm going to point it out, he has poor boxing defense. I wouldn't say awful, it's poor. And he can get boxed up on the feet. However, when his wrestling isn't working right, he can turn the offensive boxing on, and although it's not his strongest point, he does have some power in the hands, enough that he can get the job done and set back up that wrestling, or work his punches in there and get the win that way. He's only got 1 loss in his career. The guy's done pretty well for himself. So the ability to adjust mid-fight will carry him further than people that cannot, and there are fighters that just cannot adjust mid-fight. He can. One problem he does have, though, is he's a bit too measured at times. So being measured is good sometimes. You don't get a little careless or reckless or whatever, but he can be too measured, and he can give up minutes just waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for his opening for a takedown or something like that. He does that often. It hasn't really come back to bite him too much, but like I said, it can happen. And now that he's moving up and fighting better competition as he gets better, he gets better wins in his career, that's going to come back as an issue for him down the road. On the other side, we have J.J. Wilson, who is a pretty talented prospect, especially when it comes to the jiu-jitsu. Something that's really interesting for me, he's really nasty with his offensive grappling, setting up his submissions with strikes, setting up his strikes with submission attempts. The way he grinds you out from the top with that top pressure it's nasty. Like he really gets after it. And even better is when he gets to his back, he's very active, but not in the way that a lot of people are, where they're trying to throw up arm bars and just give up a round trying to throw up lazy arm bars. No, he's active trying to get back to top position, looking for scrambles to create that so he can get back to that nasty offensive grappling. So his goal when grappling is offense, and that's what I like to see. A lot of people don't do that if they're really good at jiu-jitsu. They get so comfortable at playing jiu-jitsu, as some have referred to it. For me, jiu-jitsu is great. But when you're too comfortable in your jiu-jitsu, you can often stay on your back and give up minutes in a fight, and that's not a way to win a fight unless you are of the highest tier of jiu-jitsu practitioners, and you can get those submissions anytime. That's great. Most people can't, and in a fight, it's a little different because you're getting punched and elbowed in the face. He's trying to work his way back to the top to get that offensive grappling, and that's what we want. Something else, his early grappling in the fight, it sets up his strikes. So for Wilson, he's had success later in fights with his hands that he wouldn't have had early on, because the opponent is now so tired of getting taken down, so tired of getting ground on and elbowed and kneed to the body from the ground. He uses that a lot as well. With that, he's able to set those strikes later in a fight, and that's really important. And last thing is an interesting note. He has a win over Pedro Carvalho not that long ago, and Carvalho is the guy that just beat Mads Burnell last weekend, and I was a big Mads guy. I was high on him. I thought it was gonna be a cakewalk for him. It was not. Carvalho beat him, and Wilson's got a win on him. So I know it's MMA math, and that doesn't really work, but that's a big win to have, because up until either that or Mads Burnell is just not good. But is not as good as I thought he was. But yeah, up until last Friday, I was really high on Browne. So for Wilson to have that win over a guy that just beat him pretty easily, that's impressive. So for me in this fight, I think Wilson's going to get the win here. I don't think it's as close as I originally thought it was. I was leaning Wilson to begin with, but it was real close. Now I'm more comfortably leaning Wilson. I still wouldn't bet the house on this one. I'm not that confident, but I do think Wilson should be able to get this one done. Let me know what you think, though. Am I underestimating the wrestling of Tokov? Is he able to put that top pressure on and hold Wilson down, not let him use those scrambles from his back to get into that offensive grappling? Because I do think this fight is going to end up on the ground at some point. I mean, both guys want it there. Just both guys want to implement their style. So let me know what you think. I could be wrong. I have been wrong before, but I really think that Wilson's going to get this one done. This one's pretty straightforward for me here. Keoni Diggs taking on Ricardo Seixas, I believe is how you say that. For Diggs, 3-2 in his last 5. For Seixas, 2-3. Forgot my dash. 2-3. Here we go. So for this, it's going to be an interesting matchup. We have Diggs that he strikes in combination. He's a southpaw with some power in his left hand. The guy he's an all-around pretty good boxer, honestly. His boxing is his best skill. He is an MMA fighter. He can do it all, but that boxing is where his money is made. His hands are good, and those combinations do look nice. You don't see it. You don't see boxing like that often in MMA. Usually a 2 or 3 punch combo is about the max you're going to get, except for some of the top tier guys. Diggs can throw in combinations of like 4, 5, 6 punches, and that's really impressive, and they're clean. On the other hand, for Seixas, really good leg kicks. I did like that. They're strong. They're heavy leg kicks. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in particular, is his best asset, though. But he gets content to strike, and I wish he would use his Jiu-Jitsu more because his boxing defense is not good. He will eat a lot of shots, get rocked, and dropped. He tends to get back up, but like he's rattled most of the time when he's trying to do this. He's just not good on the feet. He can throw with some power in his hands. His punches hurt. Like he's hitting guys and hurting them when he lands, but he gets hit a lot more. His boxing defense is just bad. So if he could use that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a little bit better, get in there with the Jiu-Jitsu, use that to control this fight, he might have a shot here, but I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think he's going to be content to box with Diggs here. I do think Diggs is going to be the better boxer. I think Diggs actually has some pretty good boxing skill. So for me, it's pretty clear-cut. Diggs is a better fighter. Again, this isn't a fight that's that I'm super sold on who's going to win, but I do think I lean pretty heavy on the Diggs side. I don't bet the house on it, but I think Diggs. If you think I'm wrong, let me know if you got Seixas, but let's just move on to the next one. Nothing too crazy to say on this one. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to butcher the names. Bear with me. We have Murtazaliev taking on Bestaev. Bear with me. Okay, so we got 4-1 over here, and we got 3-2 here. This fight's really clear-cut. I'm not going to waste a bunch of our time here. This is a lopsided fight that the record does not suggest that, and I'm going to tell you why. So, really good takedowns, decent ground and pound, pretty good power in his hands, good body kicks. A lot of positives. I like Murtazaliev, I think is how you say it. Bestaev, on the other hand, great record. But when you look into it, he's beaten a bunch of tomato cans, and anytime he's fought anybody that's reasonably good, he's gotten beat bad. I'm sure he has skill. I just don't know where it is, because every time he takes that jump up in competition, he gets shut down hard. And he has poor grappling defense, which is not going to do well over here. So I think this one's pretty clear-cut. Murtazaliev, I think is how I'm saying that. Bear with me. I think it should be pretty clear. He's most likely going to get the win. I'm pretty confident in this one. If Bestaev wins, I'm going to be very shocked. He's not a world beater by any means. Kind of mid-tier guy, but like working his way to the upper mid-tier. I don't know that he's mid-tier, or maybe the low end of mid-tier. His record is padded, and I don't mean padded like it was an intentionally padded one. And it was just the way that it is on the regional scene sometimes. So for me, clear pick. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Moving right along. Okay, so Richard Palencia taking on CJ Hamilton. Now, this is a fight that if you were just to look at their records coming into this fight, you would say, oh, this is a squash match. But upon further inspection, watching all of the footage that I have, watching a lot of their past fights, this fight is not a squash match. This is very close. Now, let me tell you why. So let's start with the Palencia side. So 5-0 coming in his last 5 fights. He's actually undefeated, 10-0. He does have some tricky spinning shots. I saw some nice spinning elbows when his opponent's up against the cage. Similar to the one that you're probably really familiar with where Yuri Prochazka knocked out Dominic Reyes. That's what propelled him into that title shot. Over in the UFC, of course, if you're only a Bellator fan, well, guess what? You probably don't know what that is. That's okay. Don't worry about it. But in Palencia's footage, I saw a lot of those nice little elbows like that up against the cage, and that was really good for him to get the wins early in his career. Something I want to mention, though, before I go into his next skill, he's had a hard time finishing fights since he's moved up in talent level, level of resistance, basically. Now, he's still getting the win, which is good, but he was getting finishes early on. I think his first 5 or 6 fights are all finishes, and after that it's just all decisions, and I think it's because the step up in competition, which makes sense. It should be tougher competition, but his step up in competition hasn't been as big of a step up as you'd like to see for him to no longer be able to get those finishes that he was getting early on. So, could be a red flag, could be nothing. I'm not sure yet. It's too early to tell in his career. But he does have some good takedowns, and I do like that about him. I do like that that he has the ability to implement the takedowns as well as using that striking that's a little bit unpredictable, unorthodox to mix it up with his opponents. On the other hand, Hamilton, I thought he was going to get squashed until I started watching some of his fights. Now, he has a shoddy record. That's okay. There's what he's done in those fights, especially against a guy who's 10-0, relatively unproven, though, against decent competition. He stands in that kind of karate-style stance, so he keeps his hands low, and I don't necessarily like that, but it does lead to some solid kicks out of him. He can chuck him up at your face in no time. It's kind of like a budget Stephen Thompson style. Obviously, Stephen Thompson's the man. That guy can kick you in the face, no problem, real quick. Hamilton's not there, and that's not a knock on Hamilton. Not many people are at Stephen Thompson's level. So for me, Hamilton's kicks are nice coming from that similar karate stance, but he does keep his hands low because of it. So you take one to get one, kind of. But he also has shown the ability to get up off the ground, which is going to be really helpful for him in this matchup because the takedown's there for Palencia, typically in his fights. Even against Mamedov, Hamilton was able to get back up at least a couple times. Now, sure, he got thrown right back down, and that was all she wrote. Multiple times he got thrown back down, but he got up a couple of times, and that's not something that everybody can do. At the time, I think Mamedov was ranked number 5 or something like that, but he might still be Mamedov. But the fact that he was able to get up off the ground, he took that fight on short notice as well and got up multiple times in that fight. Okay, that's big because that's against top level competition. And he's got pretty good striking elusiveness. So because he has that wide stance, now I know you can't see my feet. I'm looking down at my feet like you can. I understand. But he has that wide stance. He's able to move laterally, which a lot of people aren't. They usually move forward and back from that stance. He can shift from his wide karate stance into almost like a traditional kickboxing stance and right back into his karate style stance pretty seamlessly and move laterally, so he's not just back and forth like a lot of the karate style fighters are. Now, obviously, some of the best are not that way, but a lot of them that you see do come in with that forward and back motion only. Striking elusiveness is a lot of that. Now, that's probably why he's gotten away with keeping his hands low so long and not totally gotten knocked out in every one of his fights. So, he does move well, does keep his hands low. It's another one of those where yeah, okay, you take one to get one kind of thing. So, for me, this fight's closer than it should be. Now, I'm still going to pick Palencia. I would not bet on this fight. I don't trust that pick whatsoever. Don't come back and be like, oh, you told me Palencia was going to win. I do not think that this is a confident pick. He could get wrecked by Hamilton, and I will not be surprised. But I am going to pick Palencia here. I do favor the undefeated fighter at this stage in his career. I think he has solid takedowns. I think he will be able to get it to the ground and hold it there eventually. Hopefully for him, it's before he gets knocked out. Those kicks are nice, like I said. But at the same time, I'm not confident in it whatsoever. Hamilton's a good fighter. His record does not show his skills. For Palencia, though, his record has shown that he's beaten guys that aren't the greatest. And it's not like when you're starting out, it's not their fault necessarily a lot of the time, depending where you're fighting, especially on really low level shows where you're getting whatever is available in the local city. I get that. So for me, I'm going to take the undefeated fighter here, but Hamilton, dude's got a shot. And when I looked at this originally, looking at their records, I didn't think so. So that's where I'm at. Let me know if you found this similar information or if you think I'm crazy. I would love to hear your opinions as well. But let's go on to the next fight because we've got some really good ones towards the top of the card that I'm looking forward to telling you about. Max Rohskopf taking on Mike Hamel. Now this fight here, this one's one I'm really excited to break down for you guys. So first, let's get into some of the basics, and then we'll kind of go dig a little bit deeper, okay? So what we got 4-1 over here for the Rohskopf side, 3-2 for the Hamel side on their last 5 fights. Something that's blatantly obvious when you see these two standing next to each other: 6'1" with a 73-inch reach versus 5'9" with a 68-inch reach. The thing that makes this important, though, is that Rohskopf uses his range well. So in the striking department, he's able to use that range to keep his opponent at distance with his strikes until he's ready to wrestle, which typically he wants to because his wrestling is pretty solid. However, in this match, his opponent's wrestling is also really solid, and he's got some nasty grappling from the top. Here's the biggest X factor in this fight, and this is what sold it for me. Cardio here, this dude broke. I don't know if you saw the Austin Hubbard fight when he was in the UFC, and I wrote down a direct quote. I'm gonna check my notes. I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna grab my note so I can read this exact quote from Rohskopf to his corner, which makes me have a very hard time ever picking him again. He said, and I quote, "I don't want to do this anymore. I don't have it." That is what he said to his corner after the second round of his fight with Austin Hubbard. He won the first round, lost the second round, very bad. It's not like he was on death's door, but he was exhausted and he quit and gave up, and then that was it. He was done. He told the ref that he could not continue on. I can't pick a guy who does that, especially in a match that he's not a super lopsided favorite because he's fighting somebody that's a bum. Hamel's not a bum. This guy's pretty good. His wrestling's pretty good. I think that with his wrestling being the way that it is versus a guy who's typically going to try to wrestle you, I don't think that this reach is going to save him. I don't think he's going to be able to outstrike Hamel that well. I don't think he's going to be able to do that for 3 rounds. I think this is going to be rough for Rohskopf, and I think he probably loses this fight. I think it's by finish. I would probably a late finish, but probably by finish. I'm taking Hamel here. I think he's still like plus 100 right now. I'm not so sold on it that it's put the life savings on this one, but I like the Hamel play there. The dude's an underdog, and he probably shouldn't be against a guy who quit and was just done in a fight that he was tied. They each won a round. I don't think that fight was over by any means until he broke mentally, and I cannot pick a guy that's done that, especially at a somewhat lower level. Hubbard's not bad, but he's not top tier either. So for me, clear pick right there. Mental weakness is not something that you want in a fighter. I feel like I'm being a jerk to him. I'm sure he's a really nice guy, but I can't pick him to win this fight. So let me know if you think I'm crazy. Let me know if you think that he's really just kind of fixed that hole in his game, that big glaring weakness that I pointed out there. Because maybe he has, and I did not see it later because there just wasn't much to go off of after that in regards to where his mental state was at. But that's where I see this one. I do really like the underdog pick here, though. So let me know if you're on it. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know if you think the favorite's a pretty good play too. You can get him at a reasonable price if you think he's the rightful favorite. So let me know. Let's move on. Next up, Islam Mamedov taking on Nick Browne. This is a really interesting matchup that I think both guys have a clear path to victory, and either guy could get this win. Obviously, I'm going to make a pick, but I'm going to tell you how each of them can get the win here because I do think both of them have a clear shot at that. So let's start with Nick Browne. So for Browne here, he's very aggressive with high volume right out of the gate, which is really what you kind of need to beat a guy that's going to be more patient. In Mamedov is very patient on his striking style because he's looking for that takedown because his game is based on getting that top control, and it's very, very good top control at that. So aggressive with heat on his strike. So he's coming forward, throwing, trying to hurt you. He can get hit. He doesn't care as much about defense as he does offense, but rightfully so. I mean, it's worked for him pretty well most of the time. He's won more than he's lost. He's obviously 5-0 in his last 5. So comes forward, doesn't worry too much about the defense when he's throwing those hands. He doesn't have to worry about that too much here. Mamedov's not, he's, like I said, he's patient in striking. You don't have to worry about him throwing big shots. Something else that counts against Mamedov here in the striking department is he does move straight back. So if Browne's coming at him, straight back. There's a wall behind me, so I can't go any further back. He's not moving laterally, and that's a problem for him. The reason that is a problem, though, is because typically he doesn't think people are going to come forward like that because he's looking for that takedown. Browne is not going to worry about that. He probably should, because he's not as good on the ground. In fact, if it gets to the ground, Mamedov is going to win this. But in this fight, Browne has a good shot at coming forward right out of the gate, throwing volume with heat, and getting the win early on. If he does not do that, Mamedov's going to win this fight all day. Why is that? Well, because he's going to be able to take Browne down. He's going to be able to maul him on the ground because Browne's going to struggle on the ground to keep up with a guy like Mamedov. He's clearly a striker. So let's put it that way. He's clearly a striker. And that striking is going to be great at the beginning of the fight. But as he starts to get tired against a guy that's going to want to keep pulling him down and landing his efficient strikes from the top control, I don't think Browne's going to be able to last long term against a guy like Mamedov. So for me, Browne either wins this in the first minute and a half or so, or Mamedov takes this fight probably a late stoppage or just by decision, clear-cut decision. So for me, I'm picking Mamedov to win. I think he's going to win more often than not. But Browne's got a clear-cut shot at victory as well. So if you really like the Browne side in this fight, the striking early on is the path to victory for him. So if you're going to take him, you might want to take him by KO TKO. I do think that's his best shot. So let me know what you think. And also, if you haven't done it yet, toss a like on this video because clearly you're still watching it, so you might as well hit that like button. You clearly like the video, and we like having you around. Those likes help this video get to other people that want to see this video or who may need to see this video. Maybe you've got friends and family out there that could benefit from seeing my breakdown of Islam Mamedov taking on Nick Browne. They could be making money betting on these guys. Probably don't bet on this one. I'm not betting on this one unless you really like Browne by the early knockout. I wouldn't bet on this one. It's a little scary for me. Mamedov should win, but still. Anyway, like this video for me, would you? I think I really appreciate it. I think it's just the right thing to do. And if you want to see more of this content, go ahead and subscribe. There are going to be videos for every UFC card, every Dana White Contender Series card, even though those are no more for the rest of the season, or for the rest of the year. They're going to start back up next season. And if we can keep getting views on these Bellator cards, there will keep being Bellator previews. Eventually, we might break out into the PFL, things like that, but that's a little bit down the road. I don't have time for that yet. It takes a lot of time to make one of these videos, so if you would, I would appreciate the like. Okay, that's over. Let's go on to the next fight. I know there's some good ones coming up. Here we go. This is the fight that I'm most looking forward to on the card, as far as a fan's perspective is. This is the fight where we're putting our feet up on the coffee table, cracking open a couple of root beers, and just having a good time watching, because this fight is going to be fireworks. It's just going to be a fan's experience, because these guys, both guys are great strikers. Both guys work great in their department. And it's going to be really fun for me at least, I'm sure for you, to watch a fight between two guys that are probably going to want to throw their hands. It might go to the ground some, but when it does, it's going to be exciting and not just lay and pray. This is going to be a fun fight from start to finish, at least from my perspective, from what I've seen leading into this fight. So I'm going to break this down for you. We've got Juan Archuleta taking on Enrique Barzola. For Archuleta, 2-3 in his last 5. 2-2-1. That one is a draw over there for the Barzola side. Something I want to point out for Archuleta's 2-3. You might think, wow, that was a champion. Why is he 2-3? His losses are to the top guys. Like, he's losing only to the best of the best in the Bellator division, or the Bellator rankings. So for Archuleta, those losses, they're not so bad. Barzola, same deal. He's losing to top level guys. Maybe not quite as top level as are on the Archuleta side, but still, those losses are coming from pretty good fighters. He's not losing to scrubs. He's not losing to mid-tier guys. Neither does Archuleta. So let me break this down. So Archuleta, good footwork. His footwork, he moves in and out, moves side to side, keeps his light on his toes, and he keeps that throughout a fight. And that's something that's really impressive to me because not many people can keep that through a 5-round fight. He's shown that he can. In fact, that actually has led him to some wins in which his opponents have not been able to keep through a 5-round fight because they're trying to chase the guy who can get out of the way, step back in, hit you, get back out before you even know what's going on. So that's really impressive. He does work the body well, and he has fast hands. He can drop down 1, 2, 3, 4 shots to the body, come back up top, hit you before you knew what happened to you. So Archuleta, quick hands, works that body. Something that sucks on the Archuleta side is he can be out-grappled by really aggressive grapplers. Now, we saw that in the Patchy Mix fight, and I know that Archuleta won that fight, so hear me out. The first round, primarily the first round, little into the second round as well, I'm going to say, Archuleta was just ragdolled on the ground, taken down. Patchy Mix was relentless. The reason Archuleta won that fight is because he's got cardio, composure, and he's a freaking savage. So Archuleta was able to turn that fight around in rounds 3, 4, 5, come out and just beat the brakes off of Patchy Mix. But in those first 2 rounds, he was out-grappled hard by a guy who's a very aggressive grappler. Now, that is a 5-round fight. This is a 3-round fight. So he's going to need to turn it up a little bit more if he's going to get out-grappled for 2 rounds by a guy who does have some pretty impressive ground and pound skills on the Barzola side. I don't know that that's going to be his path to victory. Typically, he tends to be a counter striker and wants to do that. He does get backed up a lot while looking for those counter shots, and that's something that something that doesn't go well for a counter striker if those counters aren't landing and keeping the opponent back. If you're trying to counter and you're throwing your shots, but you're stepping back each time as you're throwing those, and your opponent isn't giving you the space that you think you deserve with your counter shots, the space that you're trying to force, well, that's not going to be good for a guy like Barzola when he gets backed up against the cage and those body shots are coming in hard, trying to really suck the wind right out of the guy. So for Barzola, I do like his counter striking. I don't like that when it isn't working to the best level, he doesn't ditch the game plan and go to something else, at least from what I've seen. And he also kind of gets rattled mentally when he's pressed. Like when the counter-striking is not working and he is getting backed up like that, like I said, Barzola kind of gets in this weird kind of funk where he starts getting a little more spastic, I guess. I don't know. It's very strange. I only notice it in a handful of fights, so it might not be a thing that happens all the time. But when he does, and off the top of my head, of course, I'm blanking on what fight I'm picturing it, and I cannot place who the opponent is in my head. I watched a lot of fights the last couple of days trying to catch up on this card, so bear with me. But anyway, for Barzola, if he's getting backed up and his counter-striking isn't stopping his opponent, it's not a good sign for the guy. And for that, I do think Archuleta is going to get the win. But, man, this is going to be such a fun fight to watch. Whether it is one-sided Archuleta, one-sided Barzola, somebody's going to be able to implement their game plan pretty impressively, I think. But it should be a really fun fight for as long as it lasts. I think it probably goes the distance here. I think it's going to be a very exciting 3-round fight. Lots of strikes thrown. Both guys having to bite down the mouthpiece and get that grit going. But I will pick Archuleta for the win. If you think I'm wrong, I would love your opinion. But let's move right along. I'm just going to enjoy this one. Like I said, this is the fight that you tell your buddies about the next day when they said that they missed it because they didn't have showtime. So that's where I'm at. Let me know what you think. Let's go to the next fight. Here we have Aaron Pico coming in 5-0 in his last 5 fights, taking on Jeremy Kennedy, 3-1 and 1 no contest in his last 5. Now, before we go too far into this, I think this fight is really close. For me, Pico is a massive favorite because he's on a 6-fight win streak, which is very impressive after an early struggle for him. Lost a couple of fights early on in his career. He came in with a bigger name than he probably should have. He had a lot of hype behind him, and because of that, he was thrust in just a little bit too early to some of the better fighters. And he's got a 6-fight win streak now, but it isn't against those top-tier fighters that we originally thought he was going to be competing against when he came in with that big name. So I think this fight is closer than it should be because both guys have a solid wrestling style. Pico, on the other hand, does have the boxing to fall back on. His boxing is going to be pretty darn good. Like I said here, strong boxing, strong wrestling. And he's finished 5 of his last 6 fights, of his last 6 wins. with a mix of striking and submission. So he's doing everything right at the level that he's doing it at. But the thing is, I don't think this fight is as far as the odds say. So for me, I would not put this on a betting slip. I would not parlay this. Don't anchor anything with it, because for me, Pico should get the win. I'm going to lay my cards on the table early. Pico should get the win, but Pico should not be a darn near minus 600 favorite over a guy in Jeremy Kennedy who has a similar skill set, has the same struggle when he steps up in competition, when the level jumps. He doesn't really get it done. He'll go on a win streak and then jump up in competition, and it kind of gets stopped there. Similar to what happened to Pico early in his career. We haven't seen him take that jump again. I think Jeremy Kennedy might be the last step at where he's at before he has to take that next jump. So for me, if Kennedy can get on his offensive wrestling early, his offensive wrestling is really solid. He works against the cage really well. If he can get Pico backed up against the cage, I think Pico's in for trouble. Because Kennedy's able to work a guy over from there pretty well, control them, hit them with his elbows, work his just kind of break down a guy slowly and wear on him over a fight. And then he's able to use that solid top control when he brings it down to the ground. So for me, if Jeremy Kennedy can get his offensive wrestling going early, he's got a strong path to victory here. I do think Pico has more tools overall. I think that boxing is going to pay off well. I think it's going to be tough for Kennedy to be able to outland Pico on the feet with the strikes. And I do think Aaron Pico's wrestling is pretty darn solid obviously. I do think Aaron Pico's wrestling is pretty darn good. I do think he's going to be able to use that offensively as well. But really, it comes down to who's going to be able to implement the offensive wrestling first, at least from my opinion. Because Kennedy doesn't have the boxing skills to match Pico. Pico isn't going to keep it at boxing range with the way that Kennedy's going to probably realize that he needs to get that offensive wrestling going. So whoever gets the offensive wrestling going first is probably going to get the win. I do lean Pico. I don't think those odds are the way that they should be. I would not put him as a parlay anchor. But like I said, for me, it's Pico. If you think Jeremy Kennedy's got a really good shot, I probably agree that he does. And I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you think that there's good money on the dog here, I don't doubt it. But let me know what you think. I'm not going to place a bet on the dog. I'm not that confident. I do think Aaron Pico gets the win. But like I said, the odds are crazy. Leave this one off. Don't come back to me saying I picked Pico, and because I picked Pico, you picked Pico and put money on him. Bad idea. But we've got a couple more fights on this card and some really good ones, so let's move on to those. Here we have AJ McKee and Spike Carlyle going head-to-head in our co-main event. 5-0 in his last 5 for Spike Carlyle. After leaving the UFC, he's kind of gone on to do some good things, get some wins. AJ McKee lost his title that he won against Patricio Pitbull, lost that back to Patricio Pitbull. He's now 4-1 in his last 5 fights. That was a very close fight with Pitbull. Both of them were good fights. The first one was not as close, but the second one was a very close fight. Pitbull gets the win. McKee is now moving up to 155, so lightweight in this matchup here. To me, that leads me to believe that it's a tune-up fight for AJ McKee, getting back on the winning ways, getting this ball rolling again. And Spike Carlyle has a big enough name because he does have that interesting presence, that he's an exciting character, looks cool, comes in there fast, ready to knock a guy out, does that kind of thing. So in his fighting style, he has one good round of cardio, and that's that first round, obviously, and that works for him. I mean, obviously he starts his last 5 fights, so, that's good for Carlyle. I just don't think he has the skills to match AJ McKee. AJ McKee is a top-tier all-around fighter. He can strike, he can grapple, he can do it all. It does not matter. To me, this looks like a tune-up fight. Maybe not. Maybe Carlyle's really developed a lot better since he left the UFC, and some of those regional fights were against people that are like, they're all right. I don't know. I haven't seen anything out of Carlyle to make me think that he can beat someone the likes of AJ McKee, and I'm pretty sure that that's where that is. But somehow he's only like minus 400 something as a favorite. Maybe it's because he's moving up in weight. I'm not sure. I think AJ McKee has a lot better shot of getting this one done than I think Aaron Pico does in the fight we just broke down. So for me, AJ McKee's the clear-cut pick here in the co-main event. If you really like Spike Carlyle, let me know in the comments. But yeah, I'm sticking with McKee here, and we'll move on to our main event. It's going to be a good one. I'm excited about it. Big-time main event for the Bellator Featherweight Championship. We have Patricio Pitbull taking on Adam Borics. Both guys 4-1 in their last 5 fights. The ones are a little bit different, and I want to go into those here in a moment. But the first thing I want to point out is the massive size advantage. So 5'6" with a 65.5-inch reach for our champion here in Pitbull. 5'11" with a 70.5-inch reach for the challenger. That's a big difference. And I do believe that if Borics can use that, that range there is going to be hard to match in the striking department. So for Pitbull, he needs to get this fight to the ground, or make Borics think that he's going to get this to the ground enough that he can close that distance and throw some of those power shots that Patricio Pitbull has been able to land on some other people and flatten them like they are a pancake. So with this one though, there's the age factor and the miles factor. Honestly, Patricio Pitbull has a lot of miles on that body. The guy's 35 years old, and at featherweight, 35 is getting up there. But as recently as this year, he has shown that he still has that fire, still has that will to win, and still has the skills as well as the chin and the cardio. He did that in the last McKee fight when he was able to reclaim his championship. So for me, that 35, it's not that bad. I do point it out though, just because at some point age is going to catch him. I don't think it's there yet, but there always will be that first fight where we see that, and maybe it could be this one. I'm not sure about that yet. Something that is really interesting on the other side, using that range, Borics he's also known for a lot of flying knee KOs or really explosive knockouts. So the striking department is going to favor him heavily, aside from the in-tight power shot that Patricio Pitbull has. But something that does not favor him whatsoever, Darren Caldwell made super short work of Borics in his only loss in his career. He walked through him. He cut through him like butter. So for me, Pitbull's biggest path to victory here is to get this fight to the ground, and he's a top-tier all-around fighter. He can strike, he can wrestle, he can use his jiu-jitsu. If this fight goes to the ground, Pitbull should be able to slice him up, slice and dice like it's nothing. And because of that, I do think Pitbull gets to win here. Not my most confident pick on the card. I mean, obviously we have some squash matches that I think are going to be pretty easy picks, but I do really think that Pitbull has this one. Borics has a win recently over Mads Burnell that I thought was really good up until last week. Burnell just didn't impress last week, so that win isn't as impressive. That Caldwell loss, yes, Caldwell's a top-level fighter, don't get me wrong, but I think Patricio Pitbull has better jiu-jitsu than Caldwell, and I think that Pitbull is going to be able to do the same thing if this fight can get to the ground. So for me, the clear-cut victor here is going to be Patricio Pitbull, but let me know what you think. If you think Borics gets this one done, I would love to hear your side of things. I'd love to hear what you think he can do to get it done. The only thing I think is an explosive flying knee KO right out of the gate. I just don't think over 5 rounds he's going to be able to keep that range, even though it is a very impressive reach and reach and height advantage. I don't think he's going to be able to keep that for 5 rounds. And I think it only takes one time this fight gets to the ground that Patricio Pitbull is going to be able to put on the power, land some big ground and pound, get the submission, club and sub type of deal, maybe drop him from the feet, whatever he needs to do. If it gets to the ground, I do think Pitbull's got it. He also has power to crack. He knocks people out at featherweight more than just about anybody. So for me, everything points to Pitbull aside from wild flying knee KO or wild knockout early on. So let me know what you think. I would love to hear it as always. If you've made it this far in the video, subscribe to the channel. Clearly you like this. Clearly you want to see more Bellator picks. Clearly you want to see UFC picks. You guys have been loving those. And clearly you want to see Dana White's Contender Series picks. We do all 3 of those on this channel. So if you've made it this far, hit subscribe, stick around the channel. I'll be putting them out for all the cards. You got to know when they come out, though, so if you subscribe, you'll see those. In addition to that, hit like for me because you've obviously made it to the end of the video, and you clearly like this thing. So I will see you in our next card. Also, go ahead and check out the UFC Fight Night Duran Jan card that is also out on my channel. My picks and predictions there are money. That's a good card that I like for the betting market. So if you've just seen this one and you haven't seen that one, check that out. You'll be able to find it. It's on my channel. I don't have that many videos. So here we go. See you on the next card. I've loved having you guys. It's always been a pleasure. Thanks for coming to my home. Yes, we're in my home. Thanks for coming to my home and watching these videos with me. I always appreciate it. Let's get to that next card. Let's make that money. Don't forget the root beers. Bring them over. Let's go.